followed me from Black Hollow on Halloween. It followed me from Black Hollow on Halloween. I say it like that now, soft and almost ashamed, because saying it makes it more real than driving home with a strange trinket should. The Hollow is a place people treat like a bruise in the map old houses. One tight main street, a rusted sign, and a handful of porches lit by the same tired bulbs every year. I hadn't planned to stop, only slowed because of the rain and a smell of smoke, and the way a flicker of carved light drew me like someone rereading a passage they swore they'd finished. I found the talisman under a porch step, small, eye-carved varnish catching a smear of jack-o'-lantern glow. I considered leaving it, but curiosity is the thing we always lie to ourselves about, and pockets are shallow history. I tucked it under my sleeve and drove. The first night, it was a weight against my ribs, a thing that smelled faintly of wood smoke and old glue. In the bathroom mirror, I thought my reflection lingered a fraction too long before copying me. I blamed sleepiness, the road, anything but the object folded warm in my shirt. The second sign was photographic. I took a ridiculous selfie for my own proof, tired, half smiling, and later, on the couch, scrolled it open and froze. Behind me, in the corner of the frame where the hallway should have been empty, a smear of shadow sat like someone who'd missed their stop. It wasn't in the room. It wasn't a trick of low light. It had the wrong angles, as if a smear had learned how to plan. I told myself cameras lie. Cameras manipulate. But the smear seemed satisfied by the lie and stayed as if posing. Small habits became maps. Cups were nudged a fraction of an inch, shoes arranged with the wrong toes pointing toward the door. The talisman moved once. I'd left it on the kitchen table, and in the morning, it sat on the windowsill, varnish, catching the streetlight like an accusing eye. Smells arrived out of season. Coal and damp leaves in August, the sour sweetness of overripe apples in November. These things should have been explainable. They were not. The house felt like a room that knew I was trying to be alone and resented it. Sleep fractured into corridors of half-light. Dreams built rooms around the same mirror in my hallway, a gilt oval that never showed my face properly. Sometimes it reflected the hall as it should be. Other nights, it reflected an extra doorway that wasn't there. When I woke, the scent of candle smoke lingered in the bedclothes, though no candle had burned. Waking and sleeping blurred until I couldn't tell if the mirror had lied or taught me the possibility of lying. The talisman felt heavier in dreams, like an anchor wound in slow coils. I tried to get rid of the thing. I left it in a payphone booth that still stood by the old movie theater, thinking a stranger might toss it, or the city would swallow it. By morning, it sat on my doormat, varnished dull with rain, as if the road had returned it politely. I tried giving it to a friend. She laughed and handed it back, saying people left odd things when they were drunk. She couldn't see the hairline crack glinting like a seam in a smile. It returned like an argument you make with yourself and lose. Research felt like digging under skin. Black Hollow had a dozen papered-over reports: a vanished dog, a man who left and never returned, a woman who painted her windows black. No single narrative joined them. The town was was a collage of small absences. An elderly librarian told me to stop meeting eyes with places you don't belong in, as if sight itself could be polite. I stopped telling people about the smell. I stopped telling myself I was being reasonable. A primitive part of me learned to plan escape routes that involved glass and water. That weekend, it stopped being insinuation and started being mimicry. I stood before the guilt mirror and moved slowly, raise hand, lower hand. My reflection should have matched me exactly. Instead, the glass reflected me with my shoulders curled in before I felt the curl in my body. The presence was learning timing. When the mirror copied emotion, a beat late, my stomach clenched as if someone had whispered lyrics I almost remembered. The object in my pocket warmed, as though listening to that small time lag between me and my reflection. Friends began to smirk and then worry. A line forms between skepticism and something that looks like caring. I described the photographs. They suggested filters, tricks. I admitted that I had dreams of rooms reshaping, and one stayed too long in my mouth, tasting like wood smoke. It was easier to keep the talisman hidden. Isolation isn't dramatic in a book. It's a series of tiny refusals, calls I didn't return, invitations I forgot. When someone finally came over and laughed nervously at the quiet hallway, the laugh scraped like a dropped plate. It made me want to run and apologize at once. The presence learned to show itself in third places: a window reflection across a dim coffee shop, the black gloss of a subway car, the polished back of a theater seat. It was no longer merely copying. It stole the angles of light and rearranged them. Once, in a plate glass storefront, it stood behind my reflection, its shape perfectly aligned, but not mine, as if someone had traced my outline in oil and left the tracing to wait for me to notice. My knees unlocked a little too late. The world felt like a stage, set slightly off-kilter. I went back to Black Hollow, because that's what you do when a place leaves a thread on your sleeve. You follow it to its knot. The main street looked narrower at dusk, rows of houses like shut teeth. I left the talisman on the threshold of the porch where I first found it, half expecting a gust to swallow it. Instead, I heard laughter like leaves skittering, and the porch light clicked off as if someone reading a stage direction. I held my breath and felt, absurdly, watched for a moment by the town itself, the whole place peering back. There was an old woman on a stoop who watched me with steady eyes. She did not speak like the others. She just nodded toward the talisman and then toward the trees. Her gesture suggested a boundary I hadn't known existed. "Some things just learn how to be invited," she said, and the words had the brittle calm of things said many times. I felt the absurd need to explain myself, to tell her the exact moment a photograph became a door. She smiled, not unkindly, and her face folded like an old map. I left without apology. Back home, I tried destruction. I smashed the mirror with a hammer. The glass spiderwebbed into light and sound. For a breathless minute, the hallway seemed to hold its breath with me. The talisman sat on the floor, unbroken. Then, on the edge of the shattered frame, a smear of wet shadow collected like spilled ink and slid away into the hallway, slower than shadow, as if reluctant. I felt a pressure in my ears like the closing of a door. The house was quieter than before, hollow in an almost polite way. I tried to make a last theater of it. I took the talisman to the river at dawn and dropped it into the slow black water, watching the varnish disappear. For an hour, the world felt unhitched, clean as a towel. I walked home with wet shoes, but an unexpected emptiness at my ribs, where the talisman's weight had been. That night, the house hummed, but without the irregularities. Sleep came like weather settling. I told myself I had finally closed the door. I told myself a lot of things I wanted as facts. It is easier with sentences that sound decisive. The next morning, there was a smear on my ceiling like a handprint in shadow, and on the pillow, an extra indentation that wasn't mine. I didn't check the hallway mirror. I never look now when I pass reflective glass. My steps curl inward like a person avoiding puddles. Sometimes, in the smallest rooms, I hear a sound that is almost a laugh pressed against the tongue of wood, no vowels, only the impression of amusement. I still don't know what followed me home exactly. Copy, hunger, accident, something polite enough to wait for permission. I keep the curtains drawn and count the seconds between light and reflection, because the only control left is noticing.